Hi there, thank you for joining. It's Ray with Tarot Living. So today we're going to look at tarot lesson number 5 in our series of 8 tarot lessons. So the tarot lesson for today is actually what is not in the reading. So we're going to take a look at what is absent, what's not seen in the reading, and what that may mean. So I hope you enjoy this tarot lesson. So before we get started looking at cards today, I just wanted to let you know the deck I'm using today is Pamela Coleman Smith's commemorative set, put out by US Games. And the reason that I'm actually mentioning it is because I'm going to do a full review on this. I didn't think I would like these cards as much as I do, and I'm going to show you them in a minute and tell you why I like them so much. So I just wanted to give a shout out that these cards are fantastic, and I will tell you more in a full review upcoming. Okay, so let's start taking a look at a few examples. So the first suggestion I would make is that when you're doing a reading, and we'll maybe use 3 card spreads for this particular video. When you're doing a reading and someone has asked a question, or you're just randomly picking 3 cards to see what comes up for them, you want to first scan and see if it is a predominance of major arcana or minor arcana. And in particular, if you actually see 3 major arcana come up and we don't have any minor arcana, then we see there are not any minor arcana in this reading. So what's that going to mean? So first of all, if you have 3 major arcana that come up, I would suggest that it's going to be related to a spiritual path this person is on, some kind of soul growth that they're doing, kind of an internal process of change and development that may be going on a psychological and spiritual level. But the point here is that there are no minor arcana. So what's not in the reading? So there's no minor arcana. Now, minor arcana are relating to the everyday life. They're relating to things that occur, that we run into, situations with people, how we feel about situations that occur, how we're processing daily life and the challenges of daily life. So in this case, we don't have any minor arcana, so we know that it's not about them processing the daily life circumstances. It's actually about the soul growth and the spiritual and psychological development that's going on. So it could be something that's really, I'm not sure of everyone's belief system, but some people believe that there are kind of agreements that we come into life with. So if they're asking about a person and they pull major arcana only, it can really relate to that spiritual connection that we have with that person and the growth that we need to do with that person, working something out with the individual. And it's not going to be about the everyday life necessarily. So anyway, if the point here is that if you have no minor arcana showing, it's going to certainly not be related to the everyday life. It's going to be related to something much deeper and much more profound, potentially, that will affect their soul growth and their spiritual development and their level of consciousness and conscience. So, all right, let's move on to another example. All right, here's an example. If somebody asks you a question about a relationship and they want to know what's happening in a current, romantic relationship that they have. So typically we're looking at, for relationships, there's going to be some, usually cups or water is a key indicator of the emotional element and the emotional bond or the feelings that we have for that individual. So we know that cups are kind of in the realm of relationships, typically speaking. So if you have a question in which you've asked about a relationship and they have pulled no cups, there's a couple of scenarios that can come up. So for example, if they pull all pentacles, and I've seen this many times before, just to let you know, you need to know this information, because when people ask questions about relationships, notoriously you will get potentially a theme from other types of cards, and it's important to know, what does that mean if there are no cups in the reading, and what would it mean if other things come up? So if there's no cups in the reading, then what I would say is that it's not that they, of course, don't have the emotional bond or the emotional connection, but what I would say is that their connection with that individual has been channeled in something that becomes important, or a way that it is expressed, or a focus that the relationship has that is different than potentially all about sort of sharing emotion. So you see this a lot. And so if you have a bunch of pentacles that come up in a reading when you've asked about relationships, then I would instantly say that this relationship is related to grounding areas, related to the tangible aspects that the relationship will create. So therefore, the possessions that you perhaps create together or buy together, to the money that is generated from that connection. It also relates to just as simple as saying that this relationship can be very practical, and it can be very reliable. If you have, say, the Ten of Pentacles that comes up and the Knight of Pentacles, perhaps you're looking at an individual that is very reliable, very stable, very steady. So Pentacles can really relate to that grounded, earthy aspect of a relationship, where it is perhaps a workable relationship. Perhaps you are doing projects together, or you work well together. Perhaps it's easy to get things done around the house together. You know, that kind of thing. I'm sure you know what I mean. So if you have no cups that come up, just automatically look to see what theme did come up. And here we'll look at another theme. Okay, so here's another example. So if someone asked you a question about work, or a project or something career related, typically the suits that we would see related to work are going to be Pentacles, okay, because that's going to show us how they are able to manifest in the physical realm, what kind of specific day-to-day work for the areas that are related to Virgo house. The Taurus house is going to tell us what kind of money we've actually developed, so this is a Taurus house one, and anything in Capricorn house is going to relate to the status and career aspirations. So you can see how Pentacles are going to relate to work. Wands also can relate to work, because wands are about the vitality and energy that we use to actually move toward a project or a goal. It is the passion that we feel within us and the drive that we have toward doing something. So wands become very important in terms of work, and that's why they are often talked about in terms of business, or the King of Wands, for example, being a great businessman. Three of Wands being the person who has brought a project to the first level of completion, etc., etc. So Pentacles and Wands are kind of notoriously, you know, can relate to work. So what if you have a reading where the person has pulled cards and there's none of that in the reading? So what does that mean? All right, I've seen this quite a bit. So if you have that happen, you have to automatically say that there is some other focus that this person is dealing with. There is some way that they are channeling this particular career goal, let's say, through themselves as a person. They're channeling and utilizing some level of themselves, of those four elements, that is not related to the actual tangible work part. So you have to ask yourself, what's it related to? So one of the things I often see is that we have a lot of water come up. And, you know, you initially pull a bunch of water and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, there's no Pentacles, there's no Wands, but, you know, what does this mean? So I've just randomly pulled some. So Knight of Cups actually relates to the House of Pisces, as does Moon. As I say, I just randomly pulled these, but that's water, water. And then, of course, Three of Cups is related to water. So if an individual does not have those elements in the reading, those Wands and Pentacles, you automatically have to ask yourself, what is it that they are grappling with, dealing with? What area of themselves are they working on or working through in order to make this happen? So in this case, it's going to be something emotional. You can also consider whether there's something creative going on here. So twofold. Let's talk about the first one. So they have something emotional going on. So the first thing I would say about this is this individual is really wanting to do something that has some meaning to them emotionally. They are wanting to not only feel like this project is a project in and of itself, but that it actually will have an impact on them spiritually, emotionally, and that maybe an impact on others as well. These two cards actually sit in the House of Pisces, and as I say, I just randomly pulled them, so I'm just going to do a little mini reading here. So the House of Pisces is related to helping others, some sort of self-sacrifice in order to help others. It's the helping profession can sometimes be seen in there. It can also relate to a lot of creativity. So if you have these cards pulled, I would automatically be asking myself what type of work they may be interested in. So it could be that they're doing something that really speaks to that Piscean energy, and the fact that they've got the Three of Cups relates to a connection with others. This could be someone who is wanting to do some kind of counseling or helping of others. Okay, so that's the type of thing that can come up. But just generally speaking, you have to say to yourself first, is there an emotional basis or emotional drive to feel fulfillment emotionally in this career project goal that they're talking about? So are they getting that fulfillment? Do they need to know how important that is to them? Do they need to adjust their project or their path in order to fulfill something emotionally? Or are they driven by emotions so much that they're losing sight of whether they can, monetize the situation, or whether it's going to be tangible and grounded and down to earth, and whether it's going to be realistic? So you have to ask yourself that. Is the emotion overriding the realism or the tangible, quality to it? Secondly, there's a creativity element here. So you need to ask, are they infusing creativity into this? Is that driving their career path? Is it fulfilling them on a creative level? We all want to have creative expression, and some people more than others. This person might really want that, but they're not getting that out of the current job. Perhaps they're needing to change jobs, consider a career change in order to fulfill themselves more on an emotional level. So there's an example of when you do not have wands, you do not have pentacles. What can that mean? So that's one example. Okay, here is another example. So we're talking about a career question again. So they've asked a career question, and we're seeing no pentacles, we're seeing no wands, and we're seeing a lot of swords. So if somebody pulls several swords with a career reading, it can mean many things. I can only tell you so much about if something is not there. So I'm trying to give you examples. If something's not there, what is there and what are you seeing? So if you are seeing swords, then I would automatically think a couple of different things. First of all, this person, and I just randomly picked these, but so we'll read what's there. So Ace of Swords is going to mean that there's a potential for an idea, there's a spark of inspiration in terms of thought. There's some level of truth or information that this person has that they're wanting to manifest, but they haven't yet manifested it. So this could be really that the ideas are coming to them. They have a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts, but perhaps it's really staying in that mental sphere, in that mental realm, and it hasn't been brought down into tangible results yet. Perhaps because there's no wands, they don't even know how to move it forward with that wand energy yet. And it's really staying in a mental realm. So you have to ask yourself, is there something you're really contemplating? Are you weighing things back and forth? We see the Queen of Wands, and then we've got a Four of Swords that's sitting there. They're not moving ahead. Something is sort of at a quiet place right now. Perhaps they're just really mulling things over in their mind over and over, and they're actually not moving ahead with the project quite yet. Perhaps it's a very mentally oriented project. Perhaps it's something that really has to be thought out. Perhaps it's related to communication in some way. These are ideas for if you see a lot of swords, for example, and you don't see any, pentacles or wands. So those are a couple of examples. Let's now talk about something a little bit different. All right, so another thing you can consider is whether there is a predominance of masculine or feminine. So if you're doing a 3-card reading and there are only masculine cards showing up, which is the case here, instead of the feminine cards, which are pentacles and cups, you want to ask yourself, okay, there's no feminine cards that are showing up here. So if we go back into our information about feminine masculine polarity, and you can go to, I think it's first or second video in the series, you know that the feminine aspects of the cards, they're more receptive, they're more internalized, they're not going to be extroverted, they're more introverted. They are wanting security and stability, they're wanting to consolidate, they're not wanting to get out there and do the risk taking. They're kind of wanting to stay back and make sure that everything is okay. And just kind of an internal world going on. The masculine cards, which are the wands and the swords, they're the more extroverted cards. They're active. They're moving forward. They're really using that energy for dynamic action moving forward. So if you pull, like let's give an example of a question. So if we ask a question about a relationship, and you've pulled these cards in a relationship, so you know automatically that there are no feminine cards that were pulled. So the emotional aspect and the security aspect is not going to be as important at this moment as, we've got the Knight of Swords, so moving forward very swiftly. We've got the Queen of Wands. She's very dynamic. She's very charismatic. And we've got another wand. So we know that there's going to be an outgoing aspect to things. It's going to be more passionate. It's going to be more direct. It's going to be moving forward more quickly. You see what I'm saying? So if you don't see the feminine aspects, but you're seeing the masculine aspects, you have to ask yourself, what does that mean in relation to the question? All right, let's look at something else. All right, here's another example. So if you have any type of question, it doesn't even matter what kind of question, what you want to look for in terms of what is there and what's not there is what level of development the situation is at, whatever type of situation it is. So if you're pulling cards that are things like aces, pages, and in this case I just randomly pulled, well, I didn't randomly pull it, I specifically pulled the Two of Swords because that's a card that shows that we're kind of at a stalemate point, we're not moving ahead, we haven't yet made decisions. So the point here is that if you've got pages, you've got aces, you've got things that are in the early level of development, so we have a 2, that can tell you that this project is not in a later form of development. So if you do not see 10s, if you don't see 6s, for example, you know that this particular project is in the early stages of development. So always look for that, whether we're in early, maybe mid, or later stage of development. So if someone is asking you, am I going to be able to bring such and such project to fruition, and they pulled all these cards, I would be saying that you might have to actually adjust this project. Something new is going to come up to make this project better. Or, I mean, maybe they're at the very end of the project and they can roll over into a new one. But typically someone's kind of in the middle and they're wondering, am I going to be able to bring this to fruition in the next whatever period of time? So if they pulled all these cards, I'd actually be considering whether they're going to be stalled in some way, and that some new information or new insight is going to be coming to them. They're going to learn something new that will come to them that will actually allow them to bring it to fruition. So you always have to ask yourself, are they in the early stages, the mid stage, the later stage, and what's showing up and what's not there? So if they're asking me, am I bringing this to fruition right away, and they don't have any 10s and they don't have any 6s, and there's not a sun card, there's not a world card, that kind of thing. So what is not there is going to tell me something, and what is there, of course, is going to tell me something. So I hope you found this helpful in terms of taking a look at a few different scenarios and what might happen if you do not see a certain suit or a certain element in a reading. So thanks for watching Tarot Living, and by the way, I will do a review on these cards. I told you that they're the commemorative set. I just want to say that the cardstock is absolutely fantastic. I'm loving the muted colors, and I will do a full review on this. So thanks for watching Tarot Living. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're really energetic, like my video. Take care.